In a moment, we're going to take a look at what is happening in Germany right now. And I admit, I follow German politics about this much, but this is really critical because it deals with Muslim immigrants and the backlash that is happening in Germany right now. We've got a lot to learn there. But before we go to Germany, let's go to Chicago and to Dayton, Ohio. In case you missed it, one of Donald Trump's rallies in Chicago was canceled. All right, the Chicago event was completely canceled. Over 10,000 people who intended to disrupt the meeting had RSVP'd. In other words, to go to a Trump event, you actually have to sign up online, request a ticket, and then they send you a ticket to your email address, and that allows you to get in. Over 10,000 people. 10,000. It was completely organized. MoveOn.org, super far left-wing group, funded in part by George Soros. They went, and they were successful in shutting down the meeting. And in case you missed it, you're seeing some of the little tussles that were televised over the weekend. Then, in Dayton, Ohio, the very next day, a man rushed the stage where Donald Trump was speaking and said he was going to grab the microphone and say Donald Trump was a racist. He's in custody, or he's probably gotten out by now, but he was charged with, I think, disorderly conduct and inciting a panic or something. So, here's the question. Who is to blame? Who is to blame? Because there have been little snippets of violence. There was that 78-year-old man that sucker punched that young black man at one of the rallies. There's been pushing and shoving going on at Trump's rallies. Who's to blame? Well, Rubio, Cruz, Kasich, they couldn't resist. They all weighed in. Let's see what Marco Rubio has to say.
There's only one presidential candidate who has violence at their events.
Short and sweet. Blame Trump. Let's hear from Ted Cruz, because he's far more eloquent in his condemnation of Trump.
And when you have a campaign that disrespects the voters, when you have a campaign that affirmatively encourages violence, when you have a campaign that is facing allegations of physical violence against members of the press, you create an environment that only encourages this sort of nasty discourse.
So there you go. It's a little bit of the bait and switch. You can see how he escalates all the way up to the media and the report of that lady. Something did happen where her hands were grabbed by one of Trump's staff. And now let's hear from John Kasich.
Donald Trump has created a toxic environment. And a toxic environment has allowed his supporters and those who sometimes seek confrontation to come together in violence. There is no place for this. There is no place for a national leader to prey on the fears of people who live in our great country. I'm pleased to see that the other candidates in the last debate began to realize that name-calling, that lowering the bar on American politics is not acceptable. And frankly, the coverage of this campaign has been disappointing, because it seems as though the attention goes to those who call names.
All right, John Kasich weighing in, preying on the fears of people. Let me make an illustration, okay? If you've got a bully, let's say that there's a bully, a thug in a bar, all right? Just a random story here. He's in the bar and you say to the bully, to the thug, you're a bully. You're the problem here. And then he comes unglued and he punches you or he punches your friends. Are you to blame? If he is in fact a bully, let's say that he's a criminal. Let's say that he's a drug dealer. And you say, you're a drug dealer and what you're doing, you should be ashamed of yourself. And then in a response, he takes out one of those metal sticks and whacks you in the leg or whacks your friend in the leg with it, kneecaps someone. Who's to blame? Well, there are people who say that, well, the person who opened their mouth was to blame. They should just accept the status quo. You understand that there were people who blamed Churchill? Before World War II broke out in earnest, there were people who blamed some of Hitler's behaviors on Churchill and others who were opposing Hitler. I'm not kidding. Talk about dysfunctional behavior. Talk about dysfunctional placement of blame. Donald Trump is, in part, responsible. He is. Just like the person going into the bar and saying, you're a drug dealer, is in part responsible. Just like a doctor who lances a boil is in part responsible that all of the pus came out. He didn't create the pus. He didn't create the infection. But when he lanced it, when he identified it and then lanced it, he is in part responsible for it coming out. But he didn't create the problem. And that's the issue. The atmosphere that we see politically right now did not get created by Donald Trump. To suggest it is ludicrous. So what Rubio and Cruz and Kasich are doing is using this for a moment of political gotcha, point getting. If someone was going to put blame on it, you would have to go back a year, 3 years, 5 years, 50 years, depending on what the issue is. But the simple fact of the matter is the last 7 years of the Obama administration have been some of the most divisive years in American politics, perhaps the most divisive years, certainly in my lifetime, certainly in the last 50 years. We are a divided nation. President Obama has helped fan the flames of racism. And so when you see the Black Lives Matter activists coming into Chicago and disrupting it, Donald Trump didn't create that. Donald Trump has come on the scene and said, there's illegal immigrants pouring over the border. So if an illegal immigrant commits a rape or a murder, is Donald Trump to blame for that? Donald Trump says, we need a temporary ban on Muslims because we don't know what's going on. And then a Muslim commits a heinous act of terrorism. Is Donald Trump to blame for that, for pointing it out? Do you see how ludicrous this is? Yes, Donald Trump has said things that were way too edgy for a lot of people, including me, like, talking about people being punched or... I don't agree with it. But listen to me. There is a level of frustration and there is in the electorate, and there's a level of honesty coming out of Donald Trump's mouth that is like a lance. It's like a lance. He's saying things. In fact, his first wife, Ivana, wrote to him and said, your slogan should be, he's saying what you're thinking. And that's part of the Donald Trump mystique. He's saying things that people agree with. He didn't create these tensions. He's exposing them. He didn't create the drug dealer in the bar. He's going in the bar and saying, you're a drug dealer. And that is why there is all this tension. It's not because he created it, it's because he's exposing it and he's not playing by the rules anymore. I'll be right back. We'll see what's happening over in Germany. We've got a lot to talk about. Oh, by the way, Marco Rubio won something big. Wait till you see who he won it from.